Hey guys, welcome. So today we're going to talk about a new component called ST-EasyGrid, and we're going to render a table or grid on our UI using that particular component. So without any further delay, let's jump into it. So as you see my screen, last time we have rendered some card using data from JSON engine. Today we're going to render the grid using the same data. To do that, let's go to the serverdummies.com ST-EasyGrid. And from there we're going to copy the install statements and let's run it on our terminal. Once we install it, let's import that particular module into our project. Once done, let's see the component structure. As you see, it takes three input parameters. One is content, second is config, and third is look. The fourth one is an event emitter that emits an event every time we perform some action on the rows. And now if you scroll down, you're going to see the content contains three properties. One is header and data, and the last one is footer. Data is the place where you're going to provide the data from JSON engine, and header contains the column information and are mapped to the data. And footer contains pagination and footer button and other component properties. Now the config is nothing but the on-off switches for different features in our grid, and look is the parameter using which we're going to control the style of different elements in the grid. So let's just copy the component structure and let's use it in our HTML. Now let's create the input parameters. Copy the content and then create the content in our TS file. Same way, copy the config and let's just mark all the properties to false so that we can test it later. Same way, we're going to format the content as well based on our data. So mark everything false. Keep the content mean height and max height as it is, and make the call span. I think let's keep the call span full. And now let's copy the look as well. That's it. Now let's go to the JSON engine and let's create 20 records, and we're going to create the same data format that we created last time. 20 records with name, gender, address and all. Create the link and copy the URL, and now let's replace it with our old URL. Now our grid takes a flat JSON, so I have created a format function that will format it into a flat JSON. And then I formatted the header to fit our data, and I mapped it to our we're gonna map it because now it contains some test data. We will be replacing with the data we got from JSON engine. So let's do another thing. Let's create a method that will create the content for our grid, and let's call it set table data. So set table data will take the formatted data and will assign it to the data property of our content. So let's create it and let's copy the content from ng on init. Just cut it from here, and we'll be creating it in our set table data. And now let's assign the input data to our data. There you go, guys. As you see, the data already got rendered in our grid, and we have created three columns. Those are blank. We're going to use that later. And now let's make the global search bar property in the config true. And let's go to the grid. As you see, it renders a search bar, and it also have the search functionalities. So whatever we type on the global search bar, it searches it on the whole database. Now make the footer true, and to render the footer, we need the footer properties in our content. So let's create it and footer, and let's just copy the footer content from the website that contains a pagination and a footer button. So let's make per page 10 because we already have 20 records, and yeah, it should create the total by itself, and then give the footer name as submit and make the pagination property true as well as footer button true, and also give the data length to the total so that it's going to render the total number of records. Save it, and now let's go to our demo. As you see guys, we got a functioning pagination for the grid, and when you click next, we're going to see the pages changes. To see it in a better way, let's create another column called ID because our data contain a ID property as well. So create ID, map it to field ID, and there you go guys, we got an ID column. Now when we click next, as you see, the next data is from 11th to 20th record, and if you click previous, it will be 1 to 10th record. So our pagination works. Now to capture the event emitted by our component, I have created a method called showState that spits out the event to the console. So now let's go to our app and open the console, and let's see what happens when you click the submit button. So hit the submit button, and as you see, it spits out an event containing the required information. Okay, now to make a column sortable, let's add a property called sortable true to that particular columns. Here we are adding it to ID and name column. As you see, both the columns become sortable, and we can sort it now in a ascending or descending order. Now to search data in the column level, we can add a property called inner search to a particular column. So let's add that inner search to our name column, and let's add to state column and save it. As you see, now we got two inner search boxes for that particular columns, and now if you type NJ, it's gonna filter out that particular row containing NJ. Now let's try with NY, and we got two rows. And let's now add something in our name column, maybe Lina, and it spits out one row. Basically, it applies an end condition or returns us a row where the state is NY and the name is Lina. So we can apply the multi-level search by using the inner search methods. Now to create action items inside a column or inside a cell, we can use the property called type action, and we can provide what kind of elements we want to create inside the cell. So let's try a select box, and let's add a property to our car column called type action. And now let's copy the properties from the website and paste it here, and we're gonna give a element property that says input select, and we're gonna provide items for options. So provide Honda, Toyota, and Kia. And now let's change the keep it car and change the label to select a car. Save it. And if you go to the website, you're going to see that there is a select box inside the cells, and whenever we select something, it spits out an event containing that particular value. If you open it, you're going to see that a property called car Honda has been added to that event. And if you change it, it's going to change the value in the event as well. So let's try it. If you make it Toyota, now the property car will become Toyota. Now let's add an input box to another column. So for that, let's add the property called type action to our role column. And now change the input select to input box and take out the items and change the label to max cost, maybe. Yeah, change it to max cost. And now change the name to cost. And the element name should be input text box. Save it. There you go, guys. We got one input text box inside the cells. Now let's see what happens when you type something there. So type some value over there like 2000, and as you see, one value called max cost 2000 has been added to our event. Same way, let's create a action field for checkbox. Let's name it select and give a type action and element checkbox. Same way, create another column for button. So make it save and change the input element to buttons and change the label to save. Now let's go to our app. So we created a checkbox column and a save column. Let's see what happens when you select or save something. If you go to console and click the save button, it returns us that particular row with every values that we selected or changed. Same way, checkbox also returns us the same row with a select property true or false based on the checkbox. So that's how the action items work. Now then, let's make the stripes property true and take out the call span full property. Let's see what happens to our grid. The stripes property has added stripes to our grid, and when we took out the call span property, now our grid is horizontally scrollable. So we can add as many columns as we want. Now, if you make the event-based pagination property true, our default pagination will not work. And every time we click something, it's going to emit an event based on the next and previous buttons. And the purpose behind this is now we can fetch data based on these events and render our grid or pages. Now revert back the event-based pagination property to false, and we are all set. Now let's talk about the look parameter. As you see, everything here are the class names. Let's just copy those and let's go to our style SCSS and let's create a class here called SD stripe class. And these class names could be anything. Let's create a property called background color blue. And let's reduce the opacity a little bit. Save it and let's copy the class name. And let's pass it against the SD stripe class in our look parameter. There you guys, now the new class has been applied in our grid. In the same way, we can completely redesign our grid by passing different classes. And that's all about it, guys. So thank you for watching, and we're gonna meet in our next demo video. Bye.